All right, all right. It is Tuesday night. It is 7 o'clock Central, and it's time for our weekly conversations with Commodores. And I know that you guys recognize this gentleman who is my guest this evening, Lord Byran DeGraffenreid. How are you doing tonight, Byran? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, Bernard. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I sure appreciate you making some time for us tonight. Now, before we get started, I do have to say this because three of your former teammates who will remain nameless until they pop in here wanted me to remind you that the statute of limitations in Davidson County in Nashville, Tennessee, and the state of Tennessee have long expired for anything that you may talk about tonight.
Praise God. Excellent. Fantastic. I need to know that. Thank you. You're a lawyer. So
I am. We have at least four Tennessee lawyers in our group. So I want you to know, I'm sure that pro bono, they got you back. So
good. Thank you. Good.
With that in mind, I got to say hey to OJ Fleming. I got to say hey to Dwayne Jones, who both popped in. Thank you, fellas, for showing up.
What's up, fellas?
Byran, you and Alan popped onto the scene on campus in fall of 92. How did University of Georgia, how did Georgia Tech, how did all the other schools miss on you guys and get you? How did you end up at Vanderbilt?
It's funny because we actually took several visits to UGA as well as to Georgia Tech, and we called them back then unofficial visits because we live right down the street. And Athens was one of our choices up until, sorry to say, Ray Goff came into the house and spoke directly to my mother and basically told us that we possibly could graduate in 3 years. So he wasn't necessarily putting an emphasis on education, but it's more about athletics. And that's something my mom didn't want to hear. So it came down to actually Vanderbilt and University of North Carolina, Tar Heels. And so we had our initial visit to Vanderbilt. This was in the dead of winter, February. Everybody was taking exams. So the actual visit in and of itself was one not to tell your kids about. It was pretty dull in and of itself. And we went to the University of North Carolina. We went to several visits, had a great time there. And we spoke to the coaches, and it was actually the coaches, Bill Elias, and I forgot one of the coach's name, but Coach DiNardo, that actually spoke to us and said, you know what, guys, give us another try, especially Ricky G. Everybody knows in 1990 who Ricky G is. And he said, you know what, just give them an opportunity to come back, see what the campus is, during live time when kids are on campus and, it's the atmosphere. And we decided, all right, we're going to do that. So we had 5 official visits at that particular time, and 2 of them were actually Vanderbilt. And so we took another time to actually come and visit. And when we came and visit, Shelton Quarles, Rob Dean, our host, Robert Davis. Yeah. And it was an amazing time. I'm like I said, you guys have statute of limitations. I'm going to still think that, what's not said is excellent. So not to get myself
Simon says, you better guard all the secrets, B-Dog.
Hey, Kenny, that's exactly what I said. Regardless of statute of limitations, I'm going to keep it very bland right about now.
Well, a couple of my former guests, including Kenny, who was just on, you're getting some love out of the Dominican. One of your Atlanta buddies, Derek Sartor.
D. Sauter, absolutely, my frat brother.
Oh, he used to terrorize me. Byran, he was a year behind me, maybe 2 years. I think 1 year behind me. And he used to terrorize me on practices. I'm playing scout team quarterback, and Sartor, he's just a beast on the D line back in the day.
Well, if he used to terrorize you on the field, he used to terrorize us off the field, but we can't talk about that right about now.
That's right.
Starter, you know what I'm talking
about. Well, Byran, let's come forward for just a minute to modern times. Talk about your beautiful family. Talk about what you do for a living, and then we'll kick it back to Nashville in a few minutes.
Okay. Well, right now I'm a General Securities Principal with LPL Financial. All that is a fancy term for money manager. I've been managing money for close to 25 years. My business partner, and my very good friend, Joe Saberhouse, we've been in business together for close to 19 years. We currently manage close to about $250 million of assets under management. We have about 770 clients. I think it was 788, and we have about 834 accounts. LPL is the number 1 independent broker dealer in the nation, has been for the past 15 years in regards to assets under management as well as advisors. It's an independent brokerage firm. We have no proprietary products. we're fee-based money managers, so I don't sell anything. So, but we do give advice, and we charge our clients based on fee-based money management. But like I said, I've been doing that, love that. Did not graduate with a Vanderbilt degree in finance, but graduated with a Vanderbilt degree in human organizational development. And actually, I found my way into the finance field. And it was funny. If Kenny is still listening, we used to, our strength coach was Todd Suttles and Chris Gaines. And so when we used to go in the workout, they had this small office. So in between our workouts, we used to, huddle in Todd Suttles and Chris Gaines' office. And every now and then we used to watch this little TV, and they used to have this show on, which is now CNBC, and a bunch of little ticker symbols going across the screen. So we come, and athletes, we come in and say, hey man, why don't you have BET or MTV on? And they used to tell us, man, look, we got alumni boosters that want to come here and watch this ticker symbol. I said, what is these stupid little ticker symbols on the TV? Unbeknownst to me, this is what I'll be doing for the majority of my life. And so it's funny how life in and of itself turns itself around and, transition itself. But that's just, I don't know if that explains exactly what I do. I don't want to get too bored, with it, but we only have about an hour. So I'm sure there are other questions you want to ask me, Bernard.
Oh, we're all good. We're all good. Oh, Chick, when I say Chick, who we talking about?
James Manley, you don't have to worry about it. It's James. What's up, James?
He wants to know who started those fights in his dorm room over those times.
Alan. Alan started them. It wasn't Chick. Chick was a great roommate. Alan was kind of difficult. That's why they had to, they left me and Alan. They put us in roommates together, and we basically destroyed our room, Bernard. I mean, instead of beating up on each other, we used to destroy our stuff. So, our other teammates couldn't understand, why are they not beating the crap out of each other? Why are they throwing stereos and stuff like that? Because we already know what we can do to each other, but we hurt more when I destroyed Alan's stereo versus hit him in the mouth.
Man, that right. Oh, I'm sure that got to him. Now, are we talking about the Carmichael Towers? You're talking about a different dorm? Where are we talking about?
No, we're talking about the Lows. We're talking about the Towers.
Towers.
The Towers.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace. The Towers.
Yes, rest in peace. Yeah.
If
we didn't destroy it, they were going to get destroyed somehow.
They should have been rest in peace before we ever lived in the 80s and 90s.
I don't know. We had some good times in town.
Oh, now I'll give you that. There was some great parties that went on. I don't know what you guys called them, but in the mid to late 90s, right before you guys came on, I graduated a year or two before you guys got to campus. But on Saturday nights during basketball season, right after a game in Memorial, we used to have what they called steroid parties. And those parties, you talk to Boo Mitchell, you talk to Sartor, you talk to any of those guys in the 80s. It was some epic parties that were going on in Carmichael.
Well, we had some epic parties, thank God for Ricky G, and we used to do them at the Vanderbilt Stadium Club. And I think that was probably one of the worst things they could have done, get rid of the Vanderbilt Stadium Club, because if you would, if they want top 25 talent, all you had to do is bring back the Vanderbilt Stadium Club and bring back the Vanderbilt Stadium parties, and that will get everybody, these young kids. Well, now I take that back, because with social media and cameras, it wouldn't be a good idea. Never mind. I take that all back.
Well, maybe Candace will show us what the entire new plans are for the build out. Maybe there's a space there that can revitalize those. And Kenny.
Candace used to have fun with us. I mean, she was always, like I said, just it's funny, her, Dr. Greg and all of them, they were over us a little bit, but Candace was in our class. And we're just so proud of her and what she's accomplishing at Vanderbilt.
Oh, I couldn't applaud more for someone. She's accomplished so much. And Dr. Greg, Derek was one of my teammates. He was in between our classes, but if you underthrew him in practice, you heard about it immediately, even before he got back to the huddle. And Kenny Simon, yes, they were called steroid parties. If you know some of your Vanderbilt history, Vanderbilt got in trouble in the early 80s for dealing. One of our former strength and conditioning coaches got us in trouble for a while, but we'll talk about that another time. Now, let's talk about growing up in Dunwoody a little bit, in Decatur, Dunwoody High School. I think David Summers may or may not be on here. I think David may have gone to the same high school, or at least he's from Dunwoody. I don't know if he went to the same high school. I mean, from Decatur. And EJ, Eric Jones, I know, was from Decatur. But did you guys know of Vanderbilt former players growing up, or even since when you got to Vanderbilt, who were from your part of the state?
No, Vanderbilt was, highly touted, educational institution. Not necessarily known for football, especially in the deep South. You had Georgia, Auburn, Florida State, Florida, all the schools, Arkansas, Alabama, and stuff like that. So when we were growing up in Georgia, we went to Cedar Grove first and foremost. We went to 3 different high schools. And are you sure the statute of limitations is good, Bernard? Okay. So we went to 3 different high schools and ended up at Dunwoody through the M2M program, majority minority program. And from there, it was just a blessing in disguise that we ended up at Dunwoody. Just our foundation, the teachers, the coaches, our friends that we still keep in contact with now. Travis Stroud, who's a frat brother and one of my best friends. So through those relationships and through Dunwoody, we found out about Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt came in kind of late and heavy in our recruiting because we were recruited by basically every major institution. I mean, out west, Oregon, Hawaii. Hawaii would not let us come for a visit unless we actually physically committed to them back then. And we told them, let's fly us out there, and then we'll check it out. But Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, and like I said, Vanderbilt came pretty late. But even though Vanderbilt came late, they were one of the most authentic college, and they were building something new. DiNardo just got there a year before. So the foundation in and of itself was something new. And, our class, a class of characters, Jermaine Johnson, Ronnie Gordon, who we knew prior to coming, were also being recruited heavily. And we actually, Alan and I visited them prior to taking our first Vanderbilt recruiting because we knew of them. And so just that camaraderie between our class helped seal the deal for Vanderbilt versus, let's say, University of North Carolina, because our recruiting class for the University of North Carolina was Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones. I forgot. It was a defensive lineman, first round defensive lineman. I forgot what his name's. Marvin something or Jones something. But needless to say, that was our second tier. We went to also Wake Forest. My mom was heavily on the educational aspect after football because she said football doesn't last for long.
Was it always the belief and desire for you and Alan to go to the same school for college? Yes,
but that almost didn't happen. Alan was sold on Vanderbilt and I was sold on University of North Carolina. But I was sold on University of North Carolina because of a beautiful young lady that was there. The education system at University of North Carolina was, fantastic. Don't get me wrong. The football aspect in the ACC was fantastic, but I was focused on this beautiful female that I met while on my recruiting visit, and my mom had to knock some sense into me and say, "Focus, son, focus."
Mamas always know best, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Now, was Mac Brown still the head coach at North Carolina those years? Or
funny story about that. So, what actually turned my mom off about University of North Carolina is because remember Watson Brown was there before DiNardo.
Yeah, he was my coach.
So,
yep.
Yeah, so Mac Brown, he had just got fired, and DiNardo was there, and so Mac Brown was in his office, me, my mom, and Alan, and he was sitting there saying, "Hey, look, I know you guys are being recruited at Vanderbilt. I'm not the type of coach that talks bad about any institution. I will not talk bad. They fired my brother, but I want this recruiting trip to be about University of North Carolina." Then he proceeded to downgrade Vanderbilt every chance he got throughout the whole recruiting trip. And my mom said, if somebody's going to tell you, they're going to, they show you who they are. And that's my, always when I talk to my sons, I don't care what people say, watch what they do. And so Mac Brown just proceeded to talk so bad about Vanderbilt that entire recruiting trip. And so I said, you're going to do that then no, you're going to tell us anything and then do a different thing, when we get here. So that was my decision, or my mom's decision. University of North Carolina wasn't right for at this particular time.
Well, clearly Vanderbilt was right. And you came in, you both came in with such a talented, an immensely talented freshman class.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about that class, the fall of '92, DiNardo's second team, and then take us a little bit to Bell Buckle.
Sure. So let's begin with that class. You have to understand, because I love Carlos Thomas to death, Alan Young, and I have a big story. That's my frat brother, but they couldn't stand our class. They could not stand our class at all, the 92 class. Because it was a little bit different, because at that particular time, Vanderbilt loosened their restrictions on the type of athlete that could actually come in. It wasn't, they weren't so focused on, you had to have a 4.8 or, 1,300, SAT, and a 36 ACT. The requirements were a little bit loosened that allowed Vanderbilt to recruit the type of kids that wouldn't necessarily come or get an opportunity to play and have an education at Vanderbilt. So that class was a class of interesting characters, very talented characters. Ronnie, Paul Morgan, you had Cliff Deese, you had Tank, Owen Neal, you had Kenny Simon, you had all these guys, Allen, Tim Storr, all of us, Trey Champagne, all these guys, be it specialty or offensive defensive linemen, you had all these individuals. I think our class was ranked either 14th or 17th in the nation by USA Today. We were still one of the top ranked classes. You had all this talent, but yet and still we had to come together, and our class was close.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy, but our class was really, really close, and we still talk to each other now. But we were arrogant, overly confident. We wasn't the quote unquote yes or no sir type of class. We had our own expectations of what we could build at Vanderbilt, and we didn't want to basically go with the flow, or we didn't want to basically do the same old and get the same results. We had high expectations.
It's very similar what you just described, the way Kenny Simon described the class and himself personally, just being confident as an athlete. And you have to have that if you're going to be successful, regardless of your sport or in the real world of work or whatever it is you do. You have to have a confidence. You have to have the ability to know what you can do and also recognize what you can't do.
Right.
But if you don't have that as an athlete, you're defeated before you even step on the field. Kenny says a little bit of crazy, a little bit of interesting, a little bit of disrespectful, but certainly confident. Describe
absolutely. That's a good way to describe it. Plus, we were coming from winning programs, so a bunch of our athletes were coming. So we wasn't accustomed to losing. We weren't accustomed to the thought process of losing, or the mentality of losing. That we weren't going to accept that type of mentality. And so we did come in, we some, I say arrogant, but I mean more, not as boisterous or disrespectful, but more confident that we could actually do what we were brought in here to do. And that's basically to change the program, and we tried to do that. I think we didn't have any, it was 4-7, 5-6, 5, I can't remember our records, but we were on the precipice of several times, a couple of times, of having actually a winning record and going to a bowl game. We never achieved that while we were there.
Talk about, you come in the fall of 92. What positions were you and Alan slated to compete for playing time for? Where did they have you slated?
Defensive end, and Alan's defensive tackle. And mid-year, they switched Alan from defensive tackle to offensive line, like they did with Tim Storr. And so I was behind actually Alan Young, and he was returning starter, returning senior, all SEC. And truth be told, it's funny because Alan and I could not stand one another. I mean, when you say we just distaste, but there was something about Alan, and I tell this story all the time. Regardless if I didn't like him, Alan Young came to Vanderbilt, graduated undergrad 3 years, got his master in 2. And he did this, and he was still all SEC freshman in his all SEC his senior year, 12.5 sacks. So he was all about business. And so I may not have liked him as a football player because I was ignorant, immature, and young, but I respected him as a person and a student and as an athlete, And I know I was a young guy coming in trying to take a position, but from that foundation of respect, prior to me being just like, and I had to grow up. I mean, I talked to Alan 2 days ago. I talk to Alan Young all the time. He's my frat brother. I love him because he's my brother. He checks on my son Grant. I check on his son and his family. When I come to Nashville, I stay with Alan. And so it's amazing to see the maturation and just our relationship over the years.
You know, you just hit on something that's so true about team sports. It doesn't, you're competing. You're
Right.
competing for, you want his spot. He wants to hold his spot. You're each making the other better because you know you can't slack up. You can't let up. You're watching his techniques. He's watching out probably for your techniques. And the thing about being teammates, what you just said, that respect is found in any good team. You may not win a bunch of games, but there's a big difference, I think, there. Because if you can't respect the other guy's game,
Right.
if you truly can't respect him as a teammate, the team will never be successful on or off the field. But as we all do in college, we go from being a big fish in a little pond from high school. Now you're a little fish in a big pond, but that maturation process, which everybody's on a different plane.
Right.
Some guys come in as 18-year-olds and they act like they're 35-year-olds.
Right.
Others come in and they're 18, but they act like they're 14. But we all got to get there at some point. But I love the fact that now you and Alan are as close as you are.
Well, it's funny. I also want to mention, Bernard, is that
yeah.
So I have to say this. So when I came in there, who I looked to, because if I failed to mention him, I feel bad, because John DeWitt was my best friend when I first got to Vanderbilt. He and we actually roomed together, and John was with me the night that I found out that I had cancer. We was at the TGI Fridays across the street. But what I want to say is who I looked to and who I tried to mirror my game was A. Young, his athleticism, his you know, the ways his work ethic. John DeWitt was just a straight dog. I mean, he may not have been as tall as everything, but his work ethic and his mindset, his crazy mindset was fantastic. And then Shelton Quarles. Shelton had to be the craziest something I've ever met, and he played like that. But people don't understand that Shelton made me crazy, but he's probably one of the most intelligent, articulate individuals that I've ever met. But his game was that of just a crazed person, because he always gave the X's, and I love that, watching him on film and on tape, because he you know, no regard for anything, not his body, not anything. He was just full out. And so that's who I wanted to mirror my game on, as well as Pat Akos is the one that got me using my hands the best of their ability. And I don't know where Pat is right now, but if I could ever see him in person again, I would thank him for the player that I've become, because that tight end, Pat Akos, was one of the most athletic and just sound technique tight ends I've ever met in my life. And if it wasn't for injuries, I think he would have gone a long way in the NFL.
Oh, I certainly remember John, Alan, Pat. They were all freshmen my senior year. And if anybody knows where Pat is these days, throw it in the comments, if you will. I do want to give some shout outs. We got some guys who are a little bit all over the board in years. Greg Simmons has joined us. Kenny Cole has joined us. Bill Sullivan is with us. Bill says that Pat is a professor at UNC in Chapel Hill.
Wow. Okay.
So we should be able to find him pretty easily if he's on their roster, maybe. But guys, I'm talking with Byran DeGraffenreid, B-Dog, number 91. And I'm learning so much. He was a couple of years behind me. I graduated in 90. He and his brother came in with that talented class in the fall of 92. Donardo, take us to Bell Buckle. How much fun was that for you?
Really? You want to go there? I mean,
no,
it's Hell Buckle. It's not Bell Buckle.
That's right.
I mean, honestly, I never thought that the love of football would ever leave me. But I don't know if that was an attest of attrition for a young athlete. But I honestly really don't know why the hell we was in Bell Buckle. What's the purpose of Bell Buckle? But you know, I still have dreams of Bell Buckle to this day. You know, waking up the field soggy with the helicopters on the field. I've never understood that he brought helicopters in to dry a field just so we can have practice, versus, hey, let's practice in the gym or let's go watch film. But Donardo was going to get that damn practice, and being the sniper. Yeah, everybody knows about the sniper. But Bell Buckle, I don't know, man. Being dropped off 3 miles, probably just getting in and having a run in as one of the tests. after us doing the shuttle runs back at Vanderbilt's campus, some things I still don't understand what coaches do. Hell, I don't think they understand what they do. And DiNardo's, he's on the Big Ten Network. And it seems like everybody changes because DiNardo's one of the greatest guys now. We couldn't stand him as a coach because he was a hard ass coach.
Yeah.
And but you kind of understood what he wanted to do, the mentality that he wanted to bring, coming from Colorado. He wanted to bring that type of, hard-nosed mentality. People didn't survive. A lot of people didn't survive belt buckle.
Yeah. Roosevelt Noble says, yeah, hell yeah.
Dr. Rosie with about 18 degrees.
Now, at what point in telling some of these bell buckle stories to your son, Grant, does he start rolling his eyes or correcting your stories and telling you, no, in fact, Dad, you told me it was this way, or you missed a fact?
No, I try not to tell any story about bell buckle to Grant. I like him to keep loving football. There's no reason for him not to love football. And any bell buckle story will have him, thinking, yeah, these folks are crazy. But we're in a different game now, Bernard. They rarely hit. They rarely have contact. They only have two-a-days is probably non-existent in this world. They maybe have, in their two-a-days is one pad, no pads. You know what I'm saying? So for them to even understand what actual two-a-day practice is probably beyond their comprehension.
Byron, that might upset or disrupt, and no offense to Grant, but it's that generation. We can't upset their brands. We can't mess with.
How much time do we got? How much time do you really want to get into this right now?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the athlete; it's the educational institutions that enable this to go forward. Now, don't get me wrong. The NIL is the best thing that's happened to these kids because I'm just tired of the SEC, Pac-10, the Power 5 making all this money. And if we can have an argument or discussion for us, well, they get their education paid for. To me, that's the dumbest thing anybody has ever said, based on the amount of money that's being generated through these conferences, through these institutions. I was so glad, I think it was several years ago when they tried to unionize, I guess a kid out of Northwestern tried to do that. And that started the NIL process because, it's just hard for you to tell a kid that, hey, I'm generating billions, not millions, but I'm generating billions. And, I can't, go on a date or can't pay for this. Now, thankfully, at Vanderbilt, we had our Munchie Mart card, and that was every $200 every Friday, and even then, that was still trying to difficult, just cash purposes. That didn't buy gas, that's bought food on Vanderbilt's campus. But I'm not, I can't even tell you how much I love Vanderbilt and the experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. But as far as the actual compensation, get as much as you can, guys, because this does not last long.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I wish we had the time, because I certainly, maybe I'll bring together a group of Vanderbilt players and we can all roundtable the NIL discussion. But I want to talk about, for just a brief minute, I want you to brag a little bit on Grant. I want you to talk about where he is in his recruiting process, to the extent that you want to share anything. And for folks who don't know, Byron's got a son, Grant, in is it Hamilton High School?
Hamilton High School, yep.
In Arizona, who is an up-and-comer and is on the radar. So share just a little bit, if you would, Byron, about him.
One, he's a great kid. First and foremost, I have two sons. My oldest son graduated from Michigan State University, as well as Catholic Central. But Grant, the one that he's a true Michigander, but because he played baseball, he's pretty good at baseball. We used to come and visit my brother here, and so Arizona is 70 degrees today in January, and so he was getting ready for a Perfect Game Showcase. Hamilton High School baseball team saw him when he, was getting ready for showcase. One thing led to another. He moved down to Arizona, but also Michael Zadevsky, who used to be the old head coach at Wall Lake Western or Northern, one of the two, up in Michigan, was now the new head coach down in Arizona. So it's a small world. And his son graduated from Catholic Central, where Grant was. And so he wanted Grant to come play. Grant came and played football, did extremely well. The entire team did extremely well. Made it to the state championship last year. And so he garnered some notoriety then. The difficult part about it is that because Grant didn't go to the 247, the rivals camps, stuff like that, because he was too busy playing baseball.
Right.
And so he got invited to the camps, but couldn't go to the camps. So when you're at these camps, that's where you get your recognition. That's where you get your so-called star rating. That's where they do the measurables and everything. And so he couldn't get this. So he was kind of behind the 8 ball in his, going into his senior year. And he was also only 6 feet playing defensive end, tearing up guys that are 6'5", 6'6". Film doesn't lie. And but the coaches, for the help of the team as well as for Grant's recruitment, moved him to linebacker. And he had a great year at linebacker. The team was ranked number 10 in the country. We finished number 23 in the country. We were on ESPN. We've been on ESPN 4 times in the past 2 years.
Wow.
And so he's had his exposure. He's in the process of recruiting now. We just got back from Alabama State University. He has several colleges that, like him, that are really looking at him and talking to him. University of Penn, which is another, great academic school. We had talks with Hawaii, with I'm trying to get, we spoke to University of Wisconsin, liked him, but because of his height, it was kind of an issue. Northwestern, we spoke to a lot of colleges, Southwest Minnesota State, as well as my guy, Carlton Hall, head coach from Milken, offered him, as well as Lewis and Clark for baseball. Southern University in Baton Rouge offered him for baseball, full scholarship for baseball. But he wants to play football. He's middle linebacker. He's athletic. He's cerebral, and he's anticipatory. And so I can go on and go on about him. But right now, we really like Alabama State, but we're looking at other schools, and other schools are looking at him and talking to him. And so we'll wait and see.
Well, how cool. Just making a little pitch for C. Hall. How cool would it be to play middle linebacker for C. Hall?
We can spend the rest of this conversation talking about Hall, because right now he deserves where he's busted his tail. I've talked to C. Hall throughout his entire process, and I couldn't be more happy for him, because he's earned it. Yeah. And he's going to do great things at Milken. And being a linebacker, so because Grant talks to Carlton C. Hall all the time. So don't think just because we may or may not go to Milken that he will not, lean to that tutelage.
Well, C. Hall was on the show. It's been a while now, but man, what an awesome guy. I learned so much just in our hour. We had never met before, but I learned his journey, and what a nice guy. What a great athlete during his playing days, but I really wish him the very best. And so we got some more folks who've oh, you're going to have to get into the comments. There's too many of them here.
How do I do that?
Well, you have to get to after we're on the show, after we're done. We got guys talking about giving plasma to make their car notes. That's Dr. Noble. We got OJ Fleming having to tell his students about why he has holes in his arms from when he was given plasma. Oh my gosh.
Hey, people giving blood, you get money. And so,
you guys
that's
are
what I'm
killing
saying.
me in here. We're going to say hey to Tyler Unzicker. Guys, that's so awesome. I'm talking with B-Dog Byran DeGraffenreid. Byron, I want to go back to let's take it back to school.
Sure.
Let's take it back to off the field. Your mom, you mentioned, was so instrumental in what she's in the pro recruiting process, what she did here, didn't hear during those visits. But we also know during your time period, D. Grag has got big responsibilities, making sure that from an academic standpoint and others are getting their book time in. What about the adjustment coming out of high school to Vanderbilt? Because there's always that adjustment academically, athletically, and socially. But I just want to talk about academics. How did you and Alan do that transformation of getting used to academic life in school?
Well, okay, so let me be real. So Alan and I were always academically inclined. Mm-hmm. We were lazy, but we were always academically inclined. So we just needed structure. And one of the great things about Vanderbilt, and I will give them, I like to tell Grant, focus on institutions that care for you, not only as an athlete, but as a student. And Vanderbilt truly cared for its athletes as students. They wanted to excel, for the student's sake, as well as for the reputation sake, and so they put the parameters in place, the infrastructure in place for us to succeed. Derek Gregg is an absolute fantastic, director of athletics at Northwestern now, but people don't realize that he was a warden, for us. And then I have to mention, and I pray and I hope that she's listening. If it was not for Dr. Ann Neely, she and we butted heads initially, but Dr. Ann Neely saw something in Alan and I that we didn't see in ourselves, and she nurtured that, she fostered that, and I keep up with Dr. Neely now. I love Dr. Neely. I will die for Dr. Neely. Dr. Ann Neely made sure that whatever we need, as well as Brad Bates. Brad Bates and Dr. Neely was amazing individuals, and for my success. So if I had to pinpoint several people for my academic and my reasoning for graduating, it would have to be Dr. Gregg, Brad Bates, as well as Dr. Neely, hands down. I couldn't have done it without them at all. And if they're listening, I love all of you guys, and thank you. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome. It's amazing the impact that certain individuals have along our academic journey, along our athletic journey, and you're still remembering them and still giving them credit. Coach Bates was our strength and conditioning coach my years.
Right.
You may know this, but you know he played for Bo Schembechler at Michigan.
Yep, Michigan.
Who ended up being all Big Ten at some point, played in the Rose Bowl, was a phenomenal athlete.
Yep.
And I brought it up many times, but he was very innovative in his techniques about the offseason conditioning, because guys would just grouse. There was very few who truly enjoyed. We couldn't all be Chris Gaines in our enjoyment of working out. In fact, I was the complete opposite. I played quarterback, and I just used to think, why do I need to lift weights? Well, obviously you do. Everybody does for conditioning, strength, etc. Coach Bates had some phenomenal, just innovative things, including the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which I've mentioned many times here, of pushing cars up the parking deck in the snow with Dwayne Jones and others applying the brakes ever so gently as we're trying to continue to push it up. Anyway, enough of that. Well, from an academic standpoint, if you don't get your books, you don't get playing time. Let's talk a little bit about playing time. What was, I guess, start from a practice standpoint, and then from a game standpoint. You came in as an accomplished athlete. You had the physical gifts. You had the mental wherewithal. You're watching the game and learning from one of the very, very best in Alan Young. Talk about that a little bit, that transition to the college game on the field. How was that for you?
It wasn't difficult as what people think. Coming from, especially playing football in the South, because you're dealing with top competition all the time. So it wasn't like an aw shuck or just wow. It was more or less like, hey, you have a position that I want, so I've got to do whatever I can in order to get that position. And if people know Al and I, we don't kowtow, we don't bow down to anybody at all. And so on the field, we had that same mentality. It's like either they're gonna hit you or you gonna hit them in the mouth. And I tell Grant all the time, I said, do you want to be a hitter or do you want to be the person to get hit? And so that was my mindset going in as a freshman. It wasn't about, me being a freshman and being a senior, or it was about, okay, these are offensive linemen whom I hate. And so therefore you're stopping me from getting to where I need to be. And so I took that mentality, that approach every day at practice with Coach Elias, my first defensive end coach, Bill Elias, fantastic. People say that you can't learn from, it's hard to learn from somebody who actually played the game, but I did learn a lot from Coach Elias. I learned how to actually study, to focus in on the actual players in totality, and not just as an individual position. Understand what my other defense tackle, understand what my linebackers are doing to accomplish. So therefore, if I did want to improvise, I would know what type of effect it would have on everybody else. And then it came with Coach Aiken, Ron Aiken, who to this day is my mentor, as you know, as a man, as an African man, and just his total philosophy on life, and just how to approach different things, the stability of things. Coach Aiken was the most amazing defensive line coach I had when the new regime came in, when Dowhower came in. You know, him and Coach Woody were amazing coaches. But the transition from high school to college really wasn't that, you know, difficult for me, except Hellbuckle, which has nothing to do with college football whatsoever. That's something totally, that's just a mind, you know, mess up. So, but no, it was fun. And I have to mention, and I'm throwing shout outs to everybody, but these are individuals that come to mind: Luke Wyatt, Eric, you know, EJ, you know, as a grad assistant, you know, and Coach Shoup, who's now a big time coach in the NFL, you know, and I think he was with the Carolina Panthers. Yeah. But, you know, people don't understand that Shoup was our GA, one waking us up every morning, you know, giving us a hard time. But we understood at that particular time what he was doing. I tell Grant all the time, be careful how you treat people today, because you never know what position they're going to be in tomorrow. You know, always have a respect, always have an admiration. Didn't matter from the lowest to the highest. Be respectful, be cordial, and understand what they're trying to do in the bigger scheme of things. You know, don't be a jerk. So
that's some just solid advice from a parent who's been there, who's walked in those same shoes that his child is now experiencing for the first time. And he's so lucky to have you and your brother to guide him to the extent that he wants it, needs it, or listens to it. I know all children are different. Some tune it out completely, others thrive in it completely. But right. Guys, I'm talking with Byran DeGraffenreid. And I want to talk a little bit, Byran, about the difference in the DiNardo regime and the Dowhower regime. And I know big contrast right there, but you and your class and those guys kind of transitioned through it, but it had to have been a whole different mindset, a mentality, and culture, if you will.
Yeah, DiNardo was, like I said, he was building a foundation. He was setting the tone for what he wanted to build. And I truly believe, you know, because DiNardo had success as he left Vanderbilt, went up to LSU. I think if he would have stayed, he would achieve the result that he wanted to achieve, you know, for whatever reason. And then, the Dowhower regime came in. I'm not really going to speak about Dowhower. I have my own personal issues with Rod, but I am going to speak about his assistant coaches who he brought in, who were absolutely fantastic. Like I said, Coach Aiken, Coach Woody, who was our defensive coordinator, who I had more interaction with than I ever did with Dowhower. Yeah. And that regime was amazing. You know, they had the mentality like the DiNardo. They had the will of the DiNardo regime, but they also had the experience and the expertise bringing to the table. And I think, you know, if Woody would have taken over sooner than later, I think the same results, if DiNardo would have stayed instead of going to LSU, would have happened. I think Vanderbilt would have been on a successful path.
You know, with having one of the architects of the Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain, as your defensive leader, I'm sure was I wouldn't say it was the treat, but it was certainly a unique place for a defensive player to be learning the college game from, because he had probably at that point forgotten more football than most 10 people would ever remember it. But absolutely, we've got a couple more minutes, and I want to get to the extent we don't talk a lot in these talks about games, about what happens, because we can all go back and watch film, we can all look at scoreboards and stat books. But what I do want to ask you was, being in that defensive huddle and before the plays actually start, I want you to kind of take us there for just a minute of any memories that you might have about representing the black and gold, being on that defensive line, going up against the SEC's best week in and week out. I know that's why you signed up. That's why you came to Vanderbilt, to compete against the best. Is that truly what you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, just playing in the SEC. The SEC is the best conference in the world. I mean, regardless. I mean, that's from back then to now. And even though Vanderbilt is quote unquote, toward the bottom in regards to our record, we still had athletes on there. We have a whole bunch of athletes that have gone on in the NFL and been extremely successful. So competing on the level, being in that huddle with the fellas, and just saying, because it really is about the team aspect. Like I said, knowing what your job is, your responsibility, and how it impacts everybody else. But then it goes to the one-on-one, the guy in front of you. I can care less if he's an All-American. I can care less. It's my job to do my job, and it's your job to stop me from doing my job. And we're going to see who wins after every single play. And you damn sure better understand that it's going to be every single play. So just because I play for Vanderbilt, got the black and gold on, doesn't mean that it's a weekend off, because we had people try to schedule us for their homecomings. Georgia made the mistake of doing that. We went down and whipped their tail in Athens. Yeah. And so it was, I think Garrison Hurst was, or I forgot who exactly was. That was our the running back. Then Eric Zier was the quarterback. Yeah. But we came down to Athens between the hedges and knocked the crap out of them. So we have our own individual pride as well.
Absolutely. As a retired athlete from those competitions, I'm not saying you don't play sports now or compete or do whatever.
I don't play sports now. I'm not trying to tear up anything at all.
Kenny said it was Terrell Davis is who you may be thinking of.
Well, yeah, Terrell was in. Now he was out, but it's also Garrison that was also there.
What do you miss most about team sports and being a teammate these days? When you look back,
it's hard to say that, but I don't miss anything because I talk to the fellas. I talk to the guys. When I come into Atlanta, I go see Kenny and Steph. I go see Chick, and I make sure that I stay in contact with whoever wants to continue to stay in contact. I like my frat brother Ronnie. He's my frat brother. And one of the biggest things is my fraternity in and of itself when I was at Vanderbilt. But I keep in contact with everybody. I try my best, be it through social media platforms or just picking the phone and calling them, checking on them. So I don't necessarily miss anything because I still feel that camaraderie with the fellas.
Awesome, and that's one of the beautiful things about our Facebook group here. It's reconnecting teammates. It's different years of players. Byron and I had never met until an hour ago, but I feel like I've known him for 10 years. And that's what I truly enjoy about the social media parts of this. One of my teammates, Greg Smith out of Chicago area, has signed on. Dwayne Jones. Let's see if I'm missing anybody who's come on. There's too many of them that have rolled through, but when we finish, you got to go read the comments because you're
sure
commenting. Now, we're almost finished, Byron, and I've got to tell you, I did some homework.
Yep.
And one topic that I've got to bring up, whether you choose to respond or not, that's your call. Remember, statute of limitations, all that stuff is long gone. But I want to talk about, if you will, the male review and the football helmets.
Look. Male review was the most. That's what I'm saying. If we had the male review, we couldn't have the male review now based on social media, phones, and stuff like that. But that was one of the highlights of our second visit to Vanderbilt, and they had never had freshmen or high schoolers come in and participate in the male review. So you have to understand there's 16 colleges around Vanderbilt. And so because of who Vanderbilt was, yeah, we had Tennessee State, yeah, you had, all that stuff, but we still had stellar athletes, good-looking athletes, and we had, in that stadium club, could hold anywhere between 500 to 1,000 people. And so you just picture MTSU, Tennessee State, Meharry, Fisk, and everybody, David Lipscomb, Belmont, people coming from Clark, Austin P, everywhere, University of Tennessee, for that particular male review. And yes, I did participate. And yes, I was extremely well, how would you say, received during that time. And I'm gonna leave it at that, Bernard. I'm gonna leave it at that.
I'll respect that at that. If you want to continue that conversation with Byron, you have to do it offline. This is a family friendly show we got going on here. And we've got just a couple more minutes.
Sure.
I want to talk about, because you're in a unique position. We've got some other former Commodores whose sons just committed and signed at Duke. Henry Beeland and Bobby Craycraft, two of my teammates, their sons just signed with Duke this past signing period. And that's so cool that now the teammates back in the day are now going to be teammates' dads at Duke. But here's my question for you along those lines. I'll call us the old athletes, the pre-internet athletes, the pre-cell phone athletes, in comparison to what I think is now the instant gratification athlete who has, and I'm not saying every kid, and I certainly don't know Grant, but most of those kids have got that cell phone with them 24/7. They're building their brand. They're trying to get what's theirs or what they want. But it just seems like a different mentality for the most part, away from the grind of preparing for your sport. Can you share a little perspective of what you see as a parent going through this with kids who are on the rise? It just seems like it's so different from our day.
Okay, so people may not like what I'm about to say, but kids will only do what's accepted. Kids will only do what they're able to do or they're able to get away with. Do I hold the kids accountable? Absolutely. But who I hold more accountable are the institutions, the Vanderbilts, the SEC, the football institution, because that is what they present. That is what they, put out there. That's what they market to it. These kids are now talking about, I've got to be this, I got to play this position. Because why? Because institutions have told them, hey, that's what you're going to do to get them in the door. We'll say anything we can to get you in the door. We'll market it, we'll hype you up, we'll have video graphics and stuff like that. And that's what kids are looking to. That's what kids are attracted to. It's not about work ethic anymore. It's not about earning the position. You do have college coaches and institutions that are truthful with these kids out here that will tell them, but then the kids don't want to hear that. The kids will go somewhere where they're catered to. People want to talk about Nick Saban all they want to, but Nick Saban is downright truthful with his people. He'll bring them in. People want to come play for a champion, but he'll tell them, hey, you may not play. You may not get here. Other institutions don't have that leeway. They got to do whatever they can to sell the program, to sell the institution, to sell their, because, it's a business, Bernard. Regardless of what we want to say, it's a business. And so they've got to do what they can in order to win games. And so what they got to do to cater to these kids, to make them feel special, to make them feel wanted, to make them feel more important than what they actually are, because they really haven't earned anything. And that goes back to all these rating agencies, all these recruiting agencies out here that gives these kids 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars based on their measurables. Yeah. Based on a kid is 6'4", 230 pounds, when he's projected to play, not his actual talent, not what he's done on film, because you can have a 6'4" guy, 230, blowing people up, but he's blowing somebody that's 150 pounds on film. Right. How's the competition level? Yeah. And so I truly believe that it's a two-way street in regards to how these kids prepare for themselves. High school coaches are looking to win. And, it's not like David Kelly's, who's at FAU, he's the director of player personnel, when we were kids, who I don't give a rat's tail what you think. If you think you're that special, prove it. And if you proved it this game, then you have to prove it all week in practice. And then you have to prove it next. What have you done for me lately? Yeah. What have you done to earn the right? How does your teammates talk about you? Right now, it's about stats. Right now, it's about measurables. Right now, it's about how I can market to the boosters in order to basically win. You got a great recruiting class, but people don't understand that recruiting classes really shouldn't be ranked until 2 or 3 years after the fact, because you haven't done anything. Yeah. You're based on projections. So to answer your question, I feel that it's fault of the kids of nowadays, but also the institutions because they allow that and they enable this stuff to go on. You know, and the parents have to sit there and they go, and that's why some of these parents can't control their kids. No, man, you're not going to here acting a fool. I don't care what 247 rated you. I don't care what rivals told you who you are. I don't care how great you are in non-pads. These workout warriors in t-shirts and shorts. No, but the parents have to come in and say, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to progress. This is how you succeed, and you do it again, and you repeat the motion. You keep doing it day in and day out. So no, I don't blame the kids. I blame it's sometimes these institutions. It's just too easy, and what these institutions, and I can't fault them either because they have to market to the boosters. The alumni, they want to see 4 or 5-star kids. But, do you have a kid that has a heck of a work ethic? Are we recruiting smart players that play football? Or do we recruit football players who are smart? Mm-hmm. Tell me, Vanderbilt. I don't know.
Yeah. It's the rare athlete that we learn about these days. Brian Robinson, the running back who had a breakout year for Alabama. He's in his 5th year. He didn't start his first 4 years because of the talent ahead of him. But he stayed with the program. He believed in Coach Saban's system, and he had a breakout season. And now he's going to he'll ultimately be an NFL draftee. And anyway, I hear, Byron, I hear what you're saying. And it's become such an arms race, so to speak. It's become such a, what have you done for me now? And what are you going to do for me immediately mentality? And I don't even want to open up conversation tonight about the transfer portal because that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your journey, or most of it, or some of it, part of it, and keeping it real with us tonight because it's too easy to kind of sugarcoat certain issues. They're important issues for parents who are right in the same situation that you're in. And I hope there's more conversation like that, not just in our group, but I hope there are forums where parents are actually sharing some of this. So Byron, thank you for sharing a little bit of your journey with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
But I truly appreciate what you're doing because you're keeping us as a community. And I truly appreciate what you're doing by having these conversations, these talks, and just to let people know, hey, there he is, and you're keeping the Vanderbilt community. Because this is what we're supposed to be doing as we come in as a family. Yeah. It's not just, black and gold Vanderbilt. No, if you go to Vanderbilt, you're part of the Vanderbilt community, part of the history. I'm so proud of what Dr. Noble is doing. I can't even call him Dr. Noble. I just call him Rosie, something like that. But he encompasses of what it's all about, especially with the Black Culture Center, with African Americans going to Vanderbilt and having a more prominent role in the university. What Candace is doing as acting athletic director, what Dr. Williams did, when he was there, God rest his soul. But I'm glad and I'm thankful for what you're doing by keeping us involved and keeping us together. And like you said, you and I just met each other face to face for the past hour, but I always watch what you put on Facebook. I always watch what you mention, how you keep everybody involved. So thank you for that, Bernard. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's a labor of love. I appreciate the shout out and the love, Byron. And we're going to keep doing these. I've got a ton of folks lined up coming up in the upcoming weeks. We are going to get to Twin Allen sometime in the upcoming weeks. But guys, please keep coming back on Tuesday nights at 7:00. If I haven't reached out to you, I'm going to. If I haven't reached out to you and you want to be on the show, just contact me. Y'all know my cell phone. You know how to get to me 3 or 4 different ways. But we're going to keep sharing these stories because I think they're important. I think folks need to know what it took to be a Vanderbilt Commodore, what it takes, and what to expect going forward, the good, the bad, and the not so great. So again, Byron, thank you. I'm going to sign off for now. You guys continue to be safe, do the right things for your family. We're going to get through this at some point, but I hope to see you guys, whether it's this spring on campus for Vandy Boys baseball or next fall for home football games. You guys anchor down.
Anchor down, guys. Be good.